Lama.
Der Lazy Lama Podcast. Musik und Gelaber ohne Drama.
So hello everybody, welcome to the Lazy Lama Podcast. You know me, I'm Lars. This is my good old friend Richard, who have basically seen in a couple of other episodes now. And we are here to interview the great Chris Lowe, who is visiting Leipzig from New York for only like 3 weeks here in town. Basically to play a couple of gigs and everything.
Yes.
And you are more or less a legend from the old days, I would say.
Oh, yeah, I'm legendary. I'm absolutely legendary. People talk about me like, that guy. Remember him?
Yeah. People will after you've been
okay.
So.
Okay, sure.
Now, Chris, you're originally from New York City, and you're a singer-songwriter,
Yes.
folk musician.
Yeah.
How did it come to that?
Well, I pretty much lived in New York all my life. I grew up on Long Island, and then as a teenager, I moved into the city, living in Brooklyn and Queens, and eventually landing in Greenwich Village. I've always had a kind of love affair with New York City, and up until recently, I'd never left the city in my entire life for more than a few days,
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
really hometowny kind of thing, New York.
yeah. It's where I'm from. I kind of have a love affair with the city. I mean, a lot of people who live in New York, I'm sure, would relate to that. But when I started writing music for real, it didn't even occur to me what was happening until Dave Van Rock said to me one day, he said, "You write songs about New York City the way some guys write songs about their girlfriends."
Okay.
And it was at that moment that I kind of took an overall look at what I was writing, and I was like, oh my God. Even the songs that are about a girlfriend are like saying things like, well, I saw you walking down on Bleecker Street. There's always like this reference to where we are, which, it was New York City, so.
Okay, cool. We will talk about your music in a minute, but for the beginning, because you actually didn't start as a musician, right?
Right.
Because you were a child actor first.
Yes. When I was about 5 years old, due to my talkative nature and my outgoing personality, my parents were instructed by some friends of theirs who had children who were doing modeling, and they brought me into New York City. So there I was 4.5, 5 years old. Some of my earliest memories of Manhattan, and the very first audition I went on was for a television show, a soap opera called Search for Tomorrow, and I got the part. Largely because at 5 years old, I was on a campaign to stop people from smoking cigarettes.
Oh, really?
And the audition was held at the CBS Broadcast Center, and there was the producer and representatives from Procter & Gamble, who was the big company that did soap operas, a soap company, and they were all smoking pipes and cigars and cigarettes. And
they needed a poster child, basically.
What's that?
A poster child, basically?
Well, yeah. I mean, they were just like absolutely. I mean, it was 1969. They were just, chimney stacks. And I went in there and I told them all that they needed to stop smoking. Like this 5-year-old kid told, these powerful businessmen that they need to stop smoking because it's a matter of life and breath, which was the tagline for the anti-smoking ads that were on television. Okay. And they thought that was hilarious, and they hired me. And it was a job that I maintained for actually 10 years.
10 years? So
yeah,
until you were 15?
Yeah, they allowed me to, they had my character grow up on the show. And you mentioned, I was surprised you knew his name, Eric?
Eric Leshinsky.
Yes, Eric Leshinsky. And I've always thought it was very funny, like that the writers sat down, they could have named him just about anything.
Yeah, sure.
And the family, they're like, what should we name this family? Well, we could call them the Leshinskys. And somebody said, yeah, that's what we should do.
It's so memorable.
Yeah. And poor little Eric Leshinsky, everything, if something could go wrong, it would for little Eric. He was illegitimate, which in 1969 was a very big deal. So I had a single mom. It was a very cutting edge kind of
Topic
situation.
to have
Show,
yeah.
And then, so she was faced with, she was a young mom dating men and then having to reveal little Eric, that comes with the package. You like me, you gotta like Eric. And then, then she dies. She dies in a car accident and I'm kind of left orphaned in a way and I get adopted by someone. And then the guy who adopts me gets remarried and she doesn't want to have kids. And then she finally comes around to being okay with having kids. And then Eric falls out of a tree and breaks both his legs.
Wow.
And then once his legs heal up, his family, his new family, they are abducted by bank robbers and held hostage over the course of like 36 hours. And then once that settles down, he decides he's unhappy and he runs away from home. I mean, just everything that you could imagine
was in this show.
Could go wrong. It would go wrong for poor little Eric, which actually, enabled me to have some really good, juicy acting moments, and I really enjoyed acting. I still do to this day, although I don't do it very often, but it's something that, I guess I've been a performer in
almost the whole life.
My whole life, yeah.
Yeah, because you actually got the soap opera award for the show, right?
Yes,
in
I was
1977.
Yes, I was given an award for best juvenile actor. They flew me out to the Merv Griffin show to present me with the award, and I pretty much giggled through the whole show. I mean, I was like a teenager in Hollywood. It was positively fun, but all throughout this. It's ironic because there I was, basically a successful actor as a child and a young teenager, but all I really wanted to do was be a singer.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like it's just ridiculous in a way when I think about how many people struggle to become an actor,
successful actor,
right? A working actor. And I was like, no, I don't. What I want to do is live the life of a starving artist in Greenwich Village. Thank you very much. And I got my wish. I'm a starving artist.
But you still did some smaller things over the years. Also, like we had in the pre-talk that you had a small background role in a couple of films.
Yes, well, I mean, I worked as a background actor. When I would get fed up with doing other straight jobs, I would occasionally make use of my SAG-AFTRA membership to re-immerse myself in acting as far as just background work, which is basically a good, solid, straight job in the arts. And so I was fortunate enough to work regularly on all 5 seasons of Boardwalk Empire, which was great fun because, to go to work and get dressed up like it's 1920 every day. And, it was, adventures in acting. And then, I did some other, Men in Black was another one we talked about. And that was just so much fun. We were under strict orders to all these wonderful alien costumes around us day in and day out. And we weren't allowed to take any photographs, because that's the whole selling point of the movie. Yeah. But it was great fun. And they had us, hidden away at this huge armory out in Brooklyn where we shot. It was great fun. Really, really cool. Fun stuff.
Ah, beautiful. But then, like you said, you wanted to actually be a singer and become a musician. Right?
Yeah.
Like when did you started practicing that, or what was the circumstance
Well,
that got you into that?
I think, just when I was really little, I was just the other day, I was trying to remember the exact moment that I discovered that I could sing. And I would say it was around the time I started working as an actor, because the woman who played my mother on the soap opera, Kelly Wood, had a fantastic voice. And she was constantly singing, she just loved to sing. And I started singing along with her. Mm-hmm. And people would, say, "Oh, you've got a good voice," And my dad was very musical. My dad played piano and violin, and he could sing very well also. And so he, and then
Did he force you to learn any?
no, he didn't. As a matter of fact, my dad, for years, I was saying to my dad, "I want to learn how to play guitar," and he was like, "No, you'll never stick with it. This, that, the other thing." And he finally got me a guitar, I think, just to discourage me.
Okay.
And what ended up happening was, I think, initially I did get discouraged, and but then a neighbor moved in who played guitar very well, and he also played cello, and he was a music student. And he was one of those people who you could pretty much hand him any instrument. He could.
Like a multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like 1970 something, and he started teaching me guitar, just like to in order to put gasoline in his car,
Mm-hmm.
And then I started playing music with my dad. My dad would play piano just for his own enjoyment, and I started playing along with him. And by the time I was about, I guess, 12 or 13, I started writing songs, and I started keeping a notebook of lyrics, and just, one day it just kind of hit me though that that I can write a song. Why not? Let's try to write a song. And some of them are the beginning ones that are like. I haven't looked at the notebooks in a really long time, but I remember.
But you still got those.
Oh yeah, I never throw anything away. So
But that's beautiful, man.
Yeah, it's nice. So, so yeah, somewhere I got it in my head that the difference between someone who writes songs and someone who doesn't write songs is just the idea of believing that you can, kind of, And so I started doing it, and eventually I was filling up notebooks, and a lot of them were terrible, of course,
But you have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere, and then every once in a while I would write something that I actually thought might be good, and then some other people were like, "Hey, I think that is good," but I used to say that writing songs is like unloading a truckload of boxes. And 9 out of every 10 boxes is just empty, mm-hmm. or worse than empty. It's full of crap, But every once in a while, you find something that's valuable,
like a golden nugget in the garbage. Yeah,
right. And so you have to be willing, especially in the beginning, to write a lot of bad songs in order to get to the good songs.
I think that Woody Guthrie once said, "I've written 3,000 songs in my whole life. Most of them are not very good."
Sure.
I mean, this is totally normal. Like when you are in the creative process, it is hard, but not everything is going to be great. But the great things only can be great because you did so many bad things before.
Or it's learning what not to do.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So. You need proving ground to actually build off of that.
Yeah. And what I'd like to know is, when was the first time you encountered the blues? You talked about that you were like a rock fan, the 70s.
Sure. I loved, and I still love, Led Zeppelin, and I kind of hold them in a class all by themselves, but I also like all the other rock bands of the 1970s, and I didn't really completely set out to be a folk musician. It kind of, that's what I morphed into. But I think, I think there's a part, I wanted to be a rock star, when I was about 15 years old, sure.
Who wouldn't want to be one?
Right, but when did the blues, well, I think that when I started getting, a little more proficient on the guitar and would, hear that, one of my classmates was also playing guitar and someone was playing bass or somebody, or there's a brother, a couple of brothers who are always making music in the attic above their garage.
And you form a band and do something.
Well, you go over there and just jam.
Yeah.
And whenever you're going to jam, the thing that people say, let's just do a blues. Let's play some blues in E. And so that was definitely one of the first chord progressions I learned was 12-bar blues. And, and that also, the simplicity of it helped me to start understanding music theory because, music theory sounded to me as a 15-year-old like something that I'll never be able to wrap my mind around. Mm-hmm. And, but with blues, it was like, well, you got 3 chords and 12 bars, and this is the way it goes. And then if you substitute Roman numerals for the chords, you can apply it to any key. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, so it's like that. And that kind of opened the door to like looking at music theory without that, extreme intimidation that I felt whenever somebody used to talk about that. Because I always thought of myself as as a person who plays by ear. I knew how to do the guitar chord charts and stuff like that. And eventually, I learned to read music and, and get somewhat of a handle on it. But, I feel like, the part of me that creates instinctively as opposed to, I think it's good. Like if your goal is to break the mold and break the rules and stuff, you need to learn the rules first.
Exactly. Yeah.
As opposed to just, kind of just doing everything off the cuff. Mm-hmm. I think it's good to know what the foundations are. I mean, I'm no expert, but
But you have to have some roots to actually burn them.
Right, exactly. Yes, exactly.
Okay. But this was like when you were you started with 12-ish around.
Yeah, between 12 and 15 was when I started. Those were my, songwriting
origins. And when was the first time that you actually could imagine yourself being like a professional musician at that point?
Well, I think that because of the fact that I had been a professional actor and that I had various singing gigs during that period, like even whether it be just, in my elementary school Christmas show.
Yeah.
Or, I was constantly singing and so the idea of being a professional singer did not seem like a far-fetched thing because I already was a working actor. It's just like moving from one lane to another on the highway of performing arts.
Basically.
And as someone who could sing, and act, there was always the vague possibility that I might move from one to the other or even do both. Like there were people who were like, you should go into musical theater. It just wasn't my taste because, like I said, I wanted to be a rock star, and I think that was wasn't cool enough for me. But but it didn't stop me. I was in Sound of Music. I was in all these any kind of little production that like that I could get into. I did because I just liked it, And so so it was around the same time, teenager, and it was shortly thereafter. It was as in my late teens that I started. I had been to Greenwich Village any number of times, lots of times for auditioning and stuff. They had little studios down there where they would hold auditions for either commercials or television shows or whatever I was, up for. so I had visited Greenwich Village, but it wasn't until I was in my late teens that I recognized Greenwich Village as a place for musicians to kind of cut their teeth, and I heard about the concept of open mics. Oh, yeah. And I was like, okay, are my songs good enough? This is the perfect situation to find out. Yeah, to get up there and see if you have what it takes, or see what you need to work on, Mm-hmm. And so I started doing that. I started going to open mics, and I had not yet found my voice, and I was writing prolifically, but so the Speakeasy was the place where I found myself performing the most. There were a couple other venues, but it seemed like the Speakeasy was this nucleus,
central meet-out for
right. And there was this thing that was about to dissolve just as I was showing up, called the Coop, mm-hmm. or the Musicians Co-op, and there were all these really great singer-songwriters involved, and even though it was disbanding, the music venue itself continued, and I had been performing at the open mic, and they brought someone in to book the place. And, it was the type of thing where they brought someone in new after the Co-op left. They brought someone in new to book the place. And I was just kind of standing around, and I heard that they needed somebody to do sound and lights.
Like a helping hand, yeah.
And I just was like, sure, And then next thing I knew, I was hosting the open mic. And I'm kind of like... not letting you ask the questions. I knew you were going to come to how did these things unfold? But
exactly.
So there was this downtime between I would show up, I would set up the room, and there would be a sound check for whoever was performing that night. And we had whether it was David Massengill or Rod McDonald or Paul Jeremiah, Frank Christian, Suzanne Vega. Aztec Tuesday. I mean, just goes on and on that I had the opportunity to listen to these people. Mm-hmm. And but after the sound check, there would be usually an hour or two before the audience showed up.
Ah, okay.
And I would always have my guitar with me, and I would sit around and practice until it was showtime. And one night, I had just heard about these 1920s blues artists and fingerstyle blues, and I bought a book on it, and I really thought I was onto something that nobody else knew about, which was just so utterly ridiculous. I was working on a Mississippi John Hurt song, My Creole Belle, very rudimentary, lovely song, but very rudimentary, finger picking, and Rod McDonald was walking through. I think at this point he might have been doing the booking for the room, mm-hmm. And he said, "Oh, yeah," he said, "That's you're trying to play that Mississippi John Hurt piece," and I said, "Yep," and he said, "I know a guy who teaches guitar, who he was friends with John Hurt here," and he gave me his phone number, and he said his name is Dave Van Ronk, mm-hmm. and I called up Dave and I started taking lessons with him, having absolutely no idea that he was, a legendary figure in the folk world and the music world in general. And it wasn't until
you were just this ambitious young kid who wanted to learn guitar.
And I was actually very jaded at that point about guitar teachers. Mm-hmm. And I had decided that anything that a person could, why should I pay a person when everything's probably in a book?
Yeah, I can learn it by myself.
I can learn it by myself. And I was progressing, albeit not as quickly as I would under Dave's tutelage. But, so I show up at Dave's place and I was kind of like, what have you got? You know? And,
with that attitude.
Yeah, I really was like, okay, And
come on, old timer, show me. What can you do?
I was not disrespectful. I'm not ageist at all. I was kind of impressed, to be honest with you, of the kind of presence that he had. And of course, you know, when you walked into Dave's apartment, it was really like, first of all, it was like a museum. There's all sorts of artwork and folk art, whether it be African or Inuit, the masks from Asia, tapestries.
The whole thing told the story of a life.
I mean, it was really like, you know, it was really something else. And then there was he was very into cooking, and so you would walk in, and he was the type of cook who would roast his own cumin seeds and make his own curry powders from scratch. And so you were hit with all these aromas, and just garlic and onions and coffee and cigarettes. You know, it was quite an olfactory assault. And so I was very impressed with him immediately. But still, I wanted to know, because I did not want a guitar teacher who was going to be like, okay, what do you want to learn?
Yeah.
You know, and much to my surprise and happiness, he said, play something for me. I played something for him. He said, okay, I can help you with this with your right hand, this with your left hand. I have, you know, a progressive course that, you know, everybody starts out with Freight Train and Sugar Babe. And I can take you through fingerstyle blues and ragtime, ending with classic rags like Maple Leaf Rag, St. Louis Tickle, The Entertainer, and ultimately The Pearls by Jelly Roll Morton. And I was kind of like, wow, this is what I want, because it's like, this is where you're going to start, this is where you're going to end. And, you know, it's not just like, you know, well, you know, you want to learn how to play Stairway to Heaven? Okay. And if you get there, you get there. If you don't, you don't. And that's what a lot of guitar teachers had been like for me before that, you know. And but this guy, it was a course.
Yeah. He had like this organic way of teaching you that.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was very orderly. I mean, it was just like there was a destination.
Okay, we have to cut at this point.
Okay.
But
I think it's a very nice place to have, like, it's the beginning of a long friendship.
20 minutes. 27 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, so as a student of Dave, that's how it went down basically.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he would give you a piece of music to work on, and by the next week you had either gotten to the level where he thought you were ready to move on or not, and that way everything moved in a progressive fashion, and he had his own system of tablature, that he was the kind of genius who it was easier for him to create his own system of tablature than to learn someone else's.
Oh, yeah.
And so it can be found, it's been published, and it looks like Chinese algebra. It really is kind of confusing looking, but once it's explained, it makes a lot of sense. And so, you know, there I was, going back week after week, moving along steadily, and feeling very encouraged by this. And it wasn't until a few months into it that I discovered who he was. Like, I had no idea that I was going to visit this legendary person each week, and so that I think it was the winter of 1988. I was out in some bar in Manhattan, and I had, you know, met these strangers who happened to be studio musicians, and I was just asking them questions about their experience in the industry and all this stuff. And they said, "Well, where are you at? What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm studying guitar and I'm learning how to play finger picking, blues fingerstyle." And they said, who are you studying with? And I said, this guy, Dave Van Ronk. And they said, the Dave Van Ronk?
Oh, and somebody puts the in.
And right. And I had I felt like, and they were like, he's a major recording artist, this, that, the other thing. He was this huge influence on all these folk musicians, especially Dylan and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God. I was stunned and amazed. And but my relationship with him had already, solidified. We already had kind of decided we liked each other and we were getting along great and enjoying. So there wasn't, plus there was the fact that I had been on television. I had been a successful performer. So I wasn't...
So the whole famous thing wasn't that much of a deal for you.
I wasn't, right. I wasn't all like, oh my God, he's famous. I was just like, wow, that's really cool. And because I remember going to visit him, and every time I would go to a lesson, I would bring a little list of questions. Mm-hmm. And some of them would be about not just about music. I would be asking him different questions about the material we were working on. But he was so often creating something in the kitchen. Like, you'd be halfway through a lesson and a little bell would go off in the kitchen and he'd say, excuse me, and he'd come back 3 minutes later. And the place always smelled like something wonderful was happening. And I eventually started following him into the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And doubling up on the lessons by learning some culinary things from him as well. But this particular lesson, I showed up with a set of questions, and then the last one being, "Who the hell are you?" And I said to him, I remember saying to him, I had no idea that you were a recording artist. I said, I just thought you were a guy who lived in Greenwich Village, who knew how to play guitar and liked to cook. And he said, confidentially, that's pretty much all I am. And so, and so we became friends, and after I finished his course of guitar lessons, I remember I went down kicking and screaming. I remember saying, there's got to be pieces in your file that you haven't shown me yet. He was like, look, kid, you know it all. I've shown you everything I've got. Go study with Frank Christian now. He'll take you to the next level, blah, blah, blah. Right. And I'm going through the file, and he's like, you already know how to play it, whether you know it or not. And he's, and I was very sad that I wasn't going to be visiting him every week. Yeah. And, but the next week, he called me up and asked me if I wanted to meet him for coffee. And the week after that, he invited me over for dinner. And it got to the point where I was seeing him at least once a week anyway.
Yeah. And you became like drinking buddies and
oh,
stuff
yeah.
Like that,
And,
right?
Sometimes he would say, I'm doing a show out on Long Island, and Andrea doesn't feel like driving. Would you mind driving me to the show? Mm. And then, after the show, we'd end up back at his apartment and, drinking a bottle of Jameson's, and then what would happen is I would be working on a song, and I would say, hey, I'm working on this thing. Would you mind letting me know what you think? It's halfway done. And, I remember I finally got about enough songs together for an album. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, would you be willing, I want to make an album. Would you be willing to produce it? And he said, look, I can't. Because if I produce your album, every other guitar student that I have who wants to be a songwriter is going to ask me to produce their album. And, he goes, I just don't want to have to tell people no if I say yes to someone else. And I said, okay, sure, that's completely understandable. And I said, besides, I don't really have enough money to
got one anyways.
To do it anyway. So, and, several months later, I actually figured it out and got some help. And, I ended up having enough money to make the album. And I said to Dave, Dave, I think I'm going to go into the studio. I've got enough money to do some recording, and I'm going to make an album. And he said, can I produce it? And I don't know, something had happened where, where he changed his mind, and it was the type of thing where having him, believe in you and believe in your work
is a big confidence boost.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, it was great simply to be getting his advice, but just the fact that, that he really made me feel like he liked what I was working on and that he identified with what I was working on. And, and it was so helpful to have someone point out nuances that I wasn't even aware of, like the fact that I would, like, it was sort of like I was a painter who didn't realize that he was doing landscapes. That he would, because when he said to me, "You're writing about Greenwich Village like it's your girlfriend," I was like, "Oh, he's right." And he said, "You should run with that," like
put in the little details.
Yeah, like he was like, that's a really good instinct. And it was something that I wasn't even, like, I lacked self-awareness, and he kind of like pointed out where my strengths were, and he pointed out weaknesses. And he had such a great way of, like, Dave never pointed out a weakness with any sort of satisfaction. He was purely there to be helpful. And that was a wonderful thing about him, He was a great teacher and a great mentor, absolutely. Very fortunate to have had him in my life.
Yeah, and with all that good work, 79, your first album dropped.
1997,
97, yeah.
Yeah, and it went over like a fart in church.
It's a great album. I still listen to it.
Oh, thank you.
It's a great listen.
I mean, I'm happy with it. I like the material. I've changed, of course, as an artist, but yeah, it's a really good documentation of where I was at that time, and I'm just, I'm so happy. The memories of recording it in this basement studio in a little tiny townhouse on Washington Place in the autumn of 1996, we recorded it. And it just, it was a wonderful time.
Good memories.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And the album cover was shot on Washington Square Park.
Yeah.
What's the story behind the lady in front and you in the back?
It was this really eccentric artist who I was trying to think of what to do for the album cover, and this artist had been at one of my shows, and he said I don't remember exactly how it came up, but he decided he wanted to take a stab at doing the cover art for it. And he did it all for free. And Van Rock actually was not completely on board about it, because he said it's such a humoristic cover that people are going to think your album is just like all humor and
fun and games.
Yeah. And but I was in this situation where I was like, well, look, this is the most professional layout that
I can get for free. So.
Right, and I was just like, and
it's always nice to collaborate with other artists and
right. And I just thought that as silly as it was and as out there as it was, I thought people are not going to forget this album cover,
That's right.
And,
yeah.
And so, and ironically, in just in less than 10 years or so after the album was released, cover art and stuff is no longer really,
a thing.
Yeah. And it's really unfortunate because I grew up on 12-inch discs.
Yeah.
Fold out albums where with lots of artwork, pages of artwork often, and lyrics. And so now it doesn't matter. It's something about the size of a postage stamp on your computer screen.
But some people are still into that. I have some friends who are actually designing different artworks for album covers, like Rich Falco. For example, a friend who made your
album cover, for example.
A
graphic artist, also a new musician. He's doing everything.
So it's coming back, basically, in some regards.
Yeah, I mean, like, especially in this digital age, like, I would say, like, I have so much fun. I just have a normal scanner, for example, and I do all of my posters, all of my cover art with this one scanner, and you can just scan it in. You know, like, what work and money would you have to invest in such a file in the 1990s or something? Like, it would cost you money and stuff. I can just do something, and it's really something else. Yeah.
And that you can actually get the style from back then. Nowadays, it's pretty easy.
Well, and you would think that with downloads that it wouldn't be so difficult to when you download the music of an album, that they also include, you know, a bunch of JPEGs of like the lyrics, and you know, like why is that like I don't understand why that hasn't been a thing all along. You know, like, or even old tiny albums, like why when you, like, if you were to download Led Zeppelin 4, why you don't also get the image that is inside the album.
Yeah, or like, for example, like your album, Dave Van Ronk wrote liner note text.
Yes. I mean, what about liner notes? I mean, that's like a heartbreak. Yeah, because his liner notes are something that I'm so, like, I mean, the day he said to me, look, I wrote these for your liner notes. I mean, in hindsight, like, I'm surprised I didn't cry, because it was such, like, you know, to have someone of his history say those things about you, you know. But yeah, you know, I want to broadcast that, you know, and now, you know, people buy my album, they don't get that.
And like, for research, I was trying to find these liner notes online. I could only find like certain quotes from it, but not the whole text.
I guess I should publish it.
That would be great.
Put it out there.
Yeah, like
somehow.
I would love to read them. Like, it is amazing. And I mean, like, speaking of your album in general, like, I mean, like, I met you just for context. In 2016, I was doing my research for my bachelor thesis, and I was met Mumanov's guitar store, like a very legendary store for musical instruments there. And the guy who worked there, Zeke Shine, said, "You're looking for someone who knew Dave Van Ronk?" It's Chris Lowe. And so, like, I contacted you, and so I took a guitar lesson with you. I interviewed you. And you gave me your album.
Yes.
And I started listening to it, and I couldn't stop listening. And like, even my father loved it. Like, everyone who I presented it to loved it. And like, I totally fell in love with your songwriting. And so, like, as a songwriter myself, I would like to know, like, what do you can give? Like, can you give some advice for songwriters?
Oh, that's good.
If I would want to write a song, like, I mean, it's a very complicated art, I would say, and so maybe you have some unique point of view on that.
Well, it's, you know, that's a really difficult question to answer, because some of it is, you know, just listening to other songwriters and hearing how it's done, and looking at, you know, formula, looking at structure. But so much of it has, you know, like, there are these moments as a songwriter that I can't explain what happened. I mean, a song like Downtown, like, I hardly even remember writing it. It kind of all happened in a blur. You know, I got the idea for the song, and maybe the first line or two came to me, and as occasionally happens, these moments of inspiration where it feels just like, you know, just like you're throwing up onto the page, you know, and
it's
you go
more like a feeling than an actual thinking about it, right?
It's almost like I'm taking dictation, like, and I feel like I'm not even sure where it's coming from. Like, somehow channeling into these things, and I can't explain that. And there's like, there's any number of songs that have happened like that. And, you know, Clouds and Sun, for example. I wrote that song in probably about 20 minutes.
Crazy.
And then there's other ones like, you know, that can take a long time, you know, where you're not really sure where it's going. But it's those ones where, like, I can't explain that. And, you know, I think a lot of writers would be able to identify with the idea of, like, when you're hot, you're hot. When it happens, it happens. And then I'll have these huge things where I'm like, right now, I haven't written a song in months, you know, and I'm thinking about songs constantly, but like one hasn't like exploded into my head in a long time. The song, You've Changed.
Yes.
I wrote that in the shower one day because someone had challenged me to write a song about someone you haven't seen in a long time. And then someone else had recently said something about, I don't know whether they said to write a song that is also a joke, but that they thought they wanted me to write more funny stuff. And so the combination of that, I just came up with the idea in the shower, and my girlfriend thought I was losing my mind because I was cracking myself up, and she just heard the shower running and me laughing maniacally. So, you know, it's just, you know, I used to say to people also, like, you know, where do you write your best material? Someone once said. And I said, you know, I've finished songs in the frozen food section of my grocery store. You know,
why not?
It's just like you never know when
and the muse kiss you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I can't, you know, but I can tell you that the more you listen to other artists, read Shakespeare, look at the way other people who write lyrics, you know, like, and don't just limit yourself to songwriters, like immerse yourself in as much stuff as you can, you know, and if you like something, just like devour it, you know, because it's going to come out. I think it's going to come out some other way. You know, the more you put in, the more you get out.
But in the end, your second album took almost 20 years to make, or even more. Like, how did it?
Oh, I don't know if it was like that. You know, like where I was. I don't look at it like I was trying to make an album and it took me 20 years. I think it was like
Step by step.
It was like I was accumulating material, and I was sort of like, I was in no rush to make another album. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, it was the type of thing where I didn't see a huge point in it because the Greenwich Village folk scene was kind of gone. And as much as I felt like, at that point, I felt like, well, I'm going to continue writing songs. I'm going to continue playing music. But I don't know, you know, whether or not there was much of a point of doing it, like, you know, to make money, like, or to dream of making money from it anymore, you know?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so, you know, and I think that there were, you know, maybe I could have made another album in between those two albums, but, you know, I don't know. I feel like what I grew into and what it became, I kind of feel like I you know, Van Ronk used to say to me, "Oh my God, I put out too many albums and now people request songs from this album and I don't want to play those songs, you know?" Yeah. So I guess I dodged that bullet, but, you know, big deal.
No, but this is actually a point that I wanted to ask you about because, like, you said that the first album isn't even like representing much what you are feeling now, and with the second album, because most musicians have this point in life when they bring something out, it's that time to be there,
right?
And then life continues, you know?
Right. And whereas there are still there's a chunk of material from the first album that I still play in concert, but some of it is rather dated. And you know, Tom Paxton was always a great technician when it came to taking a topical song and updating it and making it fresh. And there's a couple of things on the first album that would be a good framework for that. But right now, they're still like, I mean, it's a song where I talk about Bill Clinton, I talk about Tanya Harding, I talk about
O.J. Simpson also.
Yeah, O.J. Simpson, all this stuff that was happening in the 1990s. And, you know, I really ought to revisit that and update it. There's certainly enough
new stuff about those people.
Categories, unsavory characters worthy of mention. So, but, you know, yeah, I mean, not all of it. I don't identify with all of the music on the first album like I did when I made that album.
Yeah.
And perhaps if I'm lucky enough to live another 20 years,
we were thinking third album.
I might look at this album that came out a couple of years ago and go, I only relate to half of it, So I guess that's just the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost
Maybe
over the
we
time.
should talk about our next concert. I don't know.
Exactly.
Okay, sure.
Should plug something?
Exactly, because in the end, I always love to for my guests to have a chance to announce what is going on right now in their lives, what can we expect from you in the future, and
Sure.
basically.
Well,
What's
I would say, there is another album in the offing.
Good to know.
There's some material that I've been working on. Some songs are complete, and some songs are, still in need of finishing or at least polishing. And so that's coming hopefully in the next year or so. And then just in the immediate future, we have a couple of shows coming up in just a couple of weeks, right?
Yes, we play on the 13th, so very soon probably the episode will be out long after this, but we'll play in Eisenach in the jazz club. And on the 20th, we'll play at the beautiful Mühlkeller, which is in the east of Leipzig, very nice place. And the 25th, I'm actually releasing an album myself. And it's going to be a record release concert in the Zum Wilden Heinz, the very, very legendary Zum Wilden Heinz bar.
It's like this cozy little thing with a blockhouse and everything.
It's basically an
beer garden.
Beer garden, yeah.
Well, I'm glad I'll be able to perform with you at your release. That's an awesome thing. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah, and then after that, you're going back to New York after that?
I think so. I'm going to make a brief stop in Italy, and then I'll head back to New York. Yeah.
And one last topic is about the whole thing, because you lived in New York since what now?
Well, I was born in the 60s. So
60s, so for 60 years basically. Yeah, no, you turned 60 this year, right?
Yes.
No, but living in New York for 60 years, what was, because we talked about basically downtown is the one thing that describes a little bit in the circumstance, but what was the change over the years in New York?
Well, change is the word. New York City is constantly in a state of change, and I get very sad when I think about places that I used to love that no longer exist. But it's the nature of the city, and if it wasn't like that, it probably wouldn't be anywhere near as exciting. Now it's a completely different vibe now than it was 15, 20 years ago. And that, of course, is different from what was 10 years before that. And 10 years, it's like there's a different vibe every 10 years or so. And, I was watching a documentary on New York City, and they quoted someone who said, New York is the kind of place where if you go away for 10 years and come back, everything's different. And that was said in 1740, And I was like, okay, it's still going on today,
It's still true, yeah.
And and so it's only natural. But, I feel thrilled that I got to see what New York was like during the really gritty 70s and 80s. And then to see when it got very gentrified and stuff in the 90s. Where it was a really pleasant place to live. And it's kind of gotten a little funky again, Post-COVID, it seems like there's a bit of an edginess to it that hasn't reared its head in a long time. But, like I said, it's always in a state of flux, and that's one of the things that's so interesting and exciting about it.
Okay, that's why I get that you stayed for so many years, because that's the same thing for me in life. It's constantly changing and constantly new experiences you can have. I think that's why with the bigger cities, it's the lovely thing about that. You never know
Always so different.
what will be the same and what will be different. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would say that then we're sadly at the end of this interview.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, for me also. For you
Too.
too.
Definitely, of course.
Thanks again for you guys, for you to bring them here. Thank you for agreeing to this.
Here.
And if anybody wants to check out Chris's work, there is your website, chrislowtunes.com.
That's right. And also, you can follow me on Instagram.
Chris Lowe
23. Yeah.
And Facebook maybe also, right?
Yeah, I've got a fan page on there, sure.
Perfect. So check Chris out, listen to his music. Like the first 2 albums are there, the third one is in the making.
Yeah, they're on, and then you can find them. You can find them on YouTube, for crying out loud. They're all like, it's available. It's all.
So listen to that, and thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful time in our little Leipzig.
Oh, thank you. It's beautiful.
Enjoy the time, and that's it. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.
Seid ihr immer noch da? Leute, ich hab zu tun. Guckt doch lieber mal, was hier so geht. Da kann man auch noch was Schönes sehen. Ist alles spannender, als mich bei der Arbeit zu beobachten, oder? Guckt einfach mal rein. Wir sehen uns.